I am Jim Collison, and this is Gallup's Called to Coach, recorded on May 20th, 2022. Called to Coach is a resource for those that want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you're listening live on our live page, gallup.com/CliftonStrengths/live, there's a link right above me there to our YouTube page that has the chat room. We'd love to have your questions towards the end of the program today, or if you're listening after the fact or listening to this as a podcast, you can always email us your questions, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget to subscribe to Called to Coach on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button below so you never miss an episode. Mary Rose Wild is my guest today. Mary Rose is a vice president of talent development at Lockton. Founded in 1966, Lockton is the world's largest privately held insurance brokerage firm. Mary Rose joined Lockton in 2021, bringing over 20 years of experience in corporate training, organizational effectiveness, and human resources. Mary Rose is a CliftonStrengths champion, using her talents to enable a strengths philosophy throughout her new organization. Mary Rose also brings excellence, real-world perspective on best practices to consider when introducing CliftonStrengths at work. Her top 5: achiever, focus, activator, futuristic, and relator. Mary Rose, welcome to the program.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So good to have you. Let's get to know you a little bit. I read your bio, but lots of people check out when other people read bios. Can we hear it from your perspective? What do you get paid to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I checked in when you said my bio, especially when you said 20 years, because I sound really old when you say that. But I do have that many years of experience in all aspects of organizational development, talent management, and HR. I've had the pleasure and the privilege to be able to do it on both sides of the pond. So I've spent time in Europe over several years as well. In my current role at Lockton, it's sort of a reimagined role, and one that I think my remit is around building strategy around our talent development and talent management programs, creating clarity for our TD network, which is all of our associate development and talent development colleagues who operate in our divisions, which we call our series. And really just creating value for the organization, trying to meet it where it's at in terms of its readiness for new things like Gallup Strengths, and marshaling sort of that change forward throughout the organization.
As you think about your new role and your top 5, and how do you think it, because new role is always a great opportunity to try something new in that. How do you think you'll roll how will you roll those talents into your new position there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love my talents. I think as champions of Gallup Strengths, those of us who are coaches adopt the words guilty as charged. And I think I am guilty as charged for all of these talents and strengths, but I lean into them. The one that I feel like I use a lot in a new role is relator, is trying to really get to know all my team, my colleagues, my constituents and stakeholders, and really building deep relationships is something that's important to me. So I feel like I leverage that first and try and quiet the activator and achiever. It's hard to do because I want to be in a listening mode. And I certainly was in my first 100 days. And then I asked for a second 100 days from my leadership. I said, I need to keep listening. So that's sort of how I was sort of purposefully, I think, and deliberately thinking about my strengths and leaning into some, again, quieting others. And now that I'm about 14 months into my role and I've built what I hope is some credibility in the organization and some strong initial relationships, I feel like now I can begin to lever the achiever and the focus and the drive of activator to start getting some things done.
That's great. Sounds like you've got a good handle on it going forward.
I hope so.
What made you want to bring, a strengths-based mindset to Lockton?
Yeah, I mean, I sipped the Kool-Aid of Gallup a long, long time ago, actually. This is my now 4th company with Gallup. And so I was strength certified over 15 years ago. And I saw at that time in my life, I saw the initial, I guess, potential of Gallup. And then moving to another organization that really had it embedded into its DNA over 30 years, I saw the full manifestation of what it could be. So coming into my organization, it was something that was in the back of my mind, but any new role I take on, it's not about sort of duplicating and replicating what I've done in the past, but really just, again, listening and learning the organization and seeing if there was an opportunity. And indeed there was. Lockton is an organization that is very familiar with assessments. It's used a couple others for a couple decades now, actually. And in the course of my listening to leaders and managers and our associates in the organization, they were appreciative of those assessments, but then also they had sort of run their course, where they were sort of looking for what else can help me learn and grow, and how do I deepen in this space? And I've done everything that I possibly could with that assessment. What else can we be doing? And so that prompted us to begin the conversation of bringing CliftonStrengths into Lockton.
You're in a great spot because you've often here on Call to Coach, we interview organizations that have been doing it for a couple years, maybe 3, 4, 5 years. Yeah. You did that in organizations in the past, but now you're 14 months into this journey and all the getting started of developing a strengths-based organization is fresh in your mind. And oftentimes the question we get asked a lot by HR professionals and learning and development professionals is, what kind of barriers do you come up against? And so Locked in. It sounded like the ground was pretty fertile to begin with, but what kind of barriers did you have there?
Yeah, for sure. Yes, fertile and some readiness, but then also I would say some reluctance and hesitancy in different pockets of the organization. And I guess it was really seeing the playing field clearly and understanding the stakeholders clearly, leaning into those who are more org ready for change. And leveraging them as potential ambassadors in the organization, and then letting others sort of take their time. We knew as an organization, Lockton's various divisions, again, we call them series, operate very independently with their own P&L, their own leadership teams. And so the approach we're taking now is to let them sort of come to the tool. And to the realization of the power of that tool and that assessment and the toolkit for themselves, letting them go at their own pace, and letting that pace vary across the organization, as opposed to trying to be sort of like a one-size-fits-all approach. We're letting our 8 divisions, our 8 series, decide for themselves the pace that they would like to execute now that we have done Clifton Strengths and Clifton coaching training for the organization. So that's really worked well for us. And indeed, we do have some stakeholders. We have one division that's put their entire division through it. And that's in the course of a short 5 months. And that's great because they're our early ambassadors, and they can be sort of like the proof, if you will, for others as we continue the journey.
Certainly some of the series that you're talking about are going maybe faster than others. Are you seeing any best practices come out of those groups where it's working really well? And what are you seeing in them?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a little bit top down and grassroots is what's happening for us. So if I can get the CEO or a COO of one of my divisions engaged with Gallup Strengths and going through the 34 assessment, getting their report, getting some coaching, it sort of sells itself at that point. If they're at all open to their own development and growth, and many of our leaders are, it sells itself at that point. And they're the ones who then make the call about, oh gosh, yes, we have to do this, and let's roll it out, and let's roll it out at these layers or the whole org. That's really working from a top-down approach. Similarly, though, we're not waiting. We don't want to just have a single approach to anything. We're allowing managers, unit managers, even supervisors find the tool for themselves. And if they want to enroll in and use the assessments for their team of 8, their team of 35, that's great too, because they become ambassadors for the tool almost sideways in their organization. They're talking to their peers about it. They're talking about the wins that they're getting from it. I heard from one of our unit managers that one of her colleagues came back to the tool 3 months after the initial coaching because that person was having a challenge with a particular colleague. And she said, what am I bringing? What can I be doing better? How can I understand myself in this situation? And it proved itself to be a valuable resource for that particular person at that time.
Have you found rolling it into any onboarding programs, or have you guys created unique programs to kind of help with that adoption, even though you're kind of taking a laissez-faire approach to it, allowing people to kind of come to it on their own?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we are. So a little bit more of a programmatic approach. We have a managerial program, which we call Passport to Leadership, and we've replaced an older assessment with Gallup Strengths. So, all of our emerging leaders on a go-forward basis will get introduced to Gallup Strengths through that, which we're excited about. Additionally, as an organization, again, as we evolve and refine our thinking about sort of what gets built in the center and what gets continued to be built and deployed out in the divisions in the series. One of those is a consistent onboarding program. And as we explore the creation of that, absolutely Gallup Strengths is one of the pillars that we hope to bring forward so that any and all associates who are joining Lockton, whether they're joining us in New York City or in Maine or Omaha, Nebraska, they will be exposed to the same, cultural elements and pillars of Lockton, and one of those would be Gallup Strengths. So we're excited to be able to do that, and we hope to do so in the course of the next year.
Wait a minute, you guys have an office here in Omaha, Nebraska?
Yeah, well, I found out just this week, and I was at a conference, and I found we have at least 2 associates. I don't know if that makes up an office, but
office
we
at
have
home.
at least 2 folks. Yeah,
Work at home, folks. Here in Omaha. Oh, well, good. As you think about embedding this into your educational programs, what kind of lift do you think? They've been using some programs before, but you think about adding CliftonStrengths into that. How does that help you, and how does that help the organization in the lift for education?
Yeah, I mean, I there's just so much power of CliftonStrengths, and I'll probably answer that question slightly a different way, which is sort of like in what way are we being deliberate and thoughtful about how and when we embed CliftonStrengths into some of our programmatic elements. So if they're introduced to it initially on onboarding, and then they come across it one more time, say 5 years later in Passport to Leadership, and then maybe even further down the road in our flagship lead program, what refinements do we introduce? What different layers of CliftonStrengths and leading with strengths do we introduce? That's a sort of kind of question that we're thinking about as we want to make experience unique, but also scaffold it so that at each exposure, our associates are gaining something different or seeing a different layer about how they can lever strengths or lead with strengths or develop others with strengths, et cetera.
What kind of measurements, or how do you guys know you're making progress? This is a question we get a lot. It feels good to roll these things out. People do self-discovery. We get some team lift. Have you guys made decisions on thinking about those metrics, or what are you watching to know that you're growing?
Yeah. No, that's a really great question, because it's the qualitative and the quantitative that matters. And I'm going to be honest, here we are earlier, it's still relatively in our journey. And I don't know if I'm going to put any particular quantitative measure on Gallup itself. However, what I am sort of measuring, and this maybe begins to straddle the line, is the pull through of Gallup Strengths. So for example, in performance management, again, each one of our divisions are very unique, each one series. So their performance management process, systems, and year-end questions, for example, vary. One of our series is already thinking about, well, how do we turn these year-end performance review questions into strengths-based questions? So one of the things that we hope to see, 3 years down the line, is we look back and we see pull through. not just in programmatic elements, but just sort of the systemic HR practices of the organization. That's one of the things that's really important. Quantitatively, what's valuable to us right now, I just worked with my counterparts and account team at Gallup. And now that we have several hundred associates have gone through their CliftonStrengths, we are able to ascertain at an organizational level, what are our top 10? What are our bottom 5? That kind of data is actually really insightful to a leadership team, because at this day and age, particularly with the war for talent and so much focus on attracting, retaining, developing, and engaging our associates, this insight about the composite of our organization, who we're made up with, our DNA, et cetera, is really insightful knowledge to bring to them. So from a quantitative perspective, that's some early data that we're sharing with the executives.
When you think about the grassroots, you talked a little bit about earlier, grassroots movement, and I'm assuming as part of building a strengths-based culture, we recommend you build strengths champions. How is that? Are you seeing that happen where individuals, not necessarily trained coaches, but get excited about this framework? They kind of take it on naturally. Are you seeing that happen inside the organization? What's that kind of look like?
Yeah, it does happen. It has happened. I will tell you, this is not quantitatively measured in any way, but some of my best leaders, I would say, are the ones who are naturally inclined to develop their people, think about how to develop their teams, make them stronger. They're sort of, their language, they'll say, is I'm pouring myself into my team. They're the ones who, the minute they hear of Gallup Strengths, are like, do it, sign me up. I want my entire team, 35 people, when can you do it? And so those are my early champions. Those are my early adopters. And I like working with them just because of the positivity and energy that they bring to it. And they're the ones who not only go through it once, but I know that they're reinforcing it through team meetings after the session. They're reinforcing it. They're talking about it. They're leveraging it. And then hopefully they're able to influence others, other managers, other unit leaders along the way. So it's exciting to see, who the early adopters and champions are in our business.
Yeah, they get so excited about it, and when you can turn them loose, that natural energy, right, that they bring, the natural enthusiasm to it, they'll do it after hours. They'll do it
after hours. Yeah. I was just at a conference, one of our internal conferences. We had 300 colleagues and associates, all from different locations, and they talk about it over drinks, right? So so they're advocating for it, and they're saying things like, you got to try this, you got to do this. It totally worked for my team, and it helped so much, So it's great to see.
I think in those settings, it's working in those work group settings where they're not required to talk about it, but you'll hear somebody go, tell me your top 5 again, in a conversation, because they're trying to figure the person out, or like
absolutely
what's coming out through what they're saying. And I think that's some good indication. Thinking about good indications as we think about the rest of the year and maybe into a little bit next, any goals about, certainly you're not all the way probably as you look at this and building a strengths-based organization. What's next for you? What would you like to see coming up in the next 12 months or so, do you think? What's on the horizon there?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go back to what I said before about pull through. Like, that is a big focus. And we know that's not easily done. It's easier said than done because of just sort of the continued socialization, change management that sort of requires from both my team in the center as well as all of our colleagues out in the different series. So as we really want to embed it into the programmatic elements like onboarding, like Passport to Leadership that I've mentioned. We really want to start thinking about pulling it through with our HR processes, like, for example, talent reviews and performance management. Just start to begin to embed the language in the organization deeper. One of the things about CliftonStrengths that I love is it's not just about the 34 strengths and, the assessment, but it's that full mindset shift. And mindset shifts take time. And so we're patient with that. We understand, the change that's going to be needed over not just 1 year, but over the next multiple years for us to get there as an organization. But, early indicators, it seems to resonate with our with our folks, and particularly the millennials. We found out our millennial again, that data from Gallup organization, that they were able to give me insights to our my particular organization. They informed me that Lockton's millennials have high positivity in their top 5. So that just parallels that it ties right into this notion of being strengths based as opposed to weakness fixing organization. So yeah, we're excited to do more with it as we go forward.
You have a lot, because you're allowing the teams to kind of self-direct in a lot of ways, organization to move as they deem necessary. Have you found any set of tools or any set of resources that we make available to you working well or better than others, or is each team picking a different path to get to the same place? Do you get a sense of that at all?
Yeah, great question. A lot of Lockton's work and a lot of sort of, I'll call it the construction of our business units, series, divisions, and groups is around team-based work. So much. So I'll just kind of double click on that a little bit more to further explain. So our associates will align themselves with the team. So for example, they'll call themselves, I'm part of Team Collinson. I'm part of Team Wild. So that is hopefully shares with you the affinity that they have to their team, as well as the loyalty that they have to their team. So team dynamics, team health, really important for us. And the team blend of Gallup, that particular tool, that session that we lead, incredibly powerful because they sort of just work in their team silos so much. And the interactivity, the connectivity, the transactions between individuals matters greatly. So team blends are really important for us right now.
You just taught me a new phrase. I don't know. I never picked up on this, but I'm going to double click on that a little. Like, why have I never thought of that? I'm going to use that all the time. That is such a great metaphor for where we've come in the work process. So you're talking about teams. Are you seeing any cross-team collaboration where the framework, where the lexicon, knowing those things is helping at all? Are you hearing any stories where that's helping in cross-team collaboration?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a little bit slower as most of our cross-functional work happens with our associates in the center. So our center, 500, 600 associates, center-based associates are the ones who really work cross-functionally with each other. IT talking to legal talking with their compliance talking with HR, all that. So as we get the language out there, we see it happening more and more where folks are saying, what are your top 5? What are yours? And trying to understand each other a little bit more. One of the things that we've done too is added, and I know this is not new to Gallup at all, but it's new for Lockton, who's 14 months into the journey, but just to even add our top 5 into our signature lines, what are your top 5? Here are mine. And just to have that, that itself is a little bit, is significant in its symbolism in terms of adoption for the organization.
Yeah, people start spying on other people's top 5 to just, how am I going to work with you most effective? Or
exactly.
in what a great way. I think we've even done this at Gallup where we've started meetings, we've got this idea of a focus on you. So if we're having a meeting and a lot of the folks don't know each other, maybe spending those first 5 or 10 minutes or so talking about who we are and what we do. And so always great to see. We'll have a lot of professionals, HR professionals, organizations who are thinking about this, strengths champions inside of organizations, our independent coaches listening to this.
Yeah.
What would be your advice for them? What have you learned? Now, you've done this a couple times, but each instance of it, I'm sure, has been a little bit different. And so if we think about those 14 months at Lockton, what kind of advice would you give someone who's starting to think about this? And say, what advice would you give?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I would say 3 things. One is lean in, and then patience and persistence. And I think that the 2 latter bits come hand in hand. So one, the patience is about listening to the organization or your client if you're independent, and really just trying to understand the org structure, the org dynamics, the politics, even the power dynamics of the company. Just really seeing where the opportunities may be. But I also think that success as a change agent in introducing Gallup strengths is about persistence in doing so. So, I think the first no is just a no, not now. And so it leaves the door open for maybe coming back 3 months later or 6 months later to re-engage in the conversation or open it up once more and see if the mindset has shifted, if the thought patterns have changed, if there's more willingness now than there was, 6 months ago. So I think that's what I would say is lean into those opportunities and then have patience and persistence.
I like that, patience and persistence, right? Continually moving forward. Yeah. Let me drill down a little bit on that as we think about the advice you give your new managers. So when a team is coming to this for the first time, and they've decided to move into this, the manager plays a huge role in the success of this rollout. And hopefully they're supportive of it. I'm sure they are if they're asking for it. What kind of advice are you giving them now that maybe you either didn't give them early on, or what have you learned about Lockton and the advice to managers?
Yeah. And this is probably true of many who are in a managerial seat, which is there's insight, awareness that happens, powerful like information coming into them through CliftonStrengths. All managers, at least all the ones in Lockton that I've run into, then go, so now what? What do I do? Right. So 2 hours of insight, 2 hours of self-awareness, 2 hours of awareness of who I am, who they are, all this. But they always say, no, so now what do I do? So I've learned to give them homework is what I've done. And I give them just something. Here's what you do over the course of the next 5 months. Strengths is so new to you guys. It's going to take you more than just these 2 hours to even begin to peel back all the layers of your top 5. So just for example, I might give them, here's your homework, 1 strength every month for the next 5 months. Focus in on it, dedicate some team time to it, your next team meeting, or at least carve out a little portion of your team meetings to be talking about it. That's enough to get you continuing to use the language of strength, getting comfortable with it, beginning to make it your own and living in it. So homework is what I give the managers.
Are they doing it? Do you
They do. Yeah. They'll, I mean, I won't hear from everybody, but it's nice to know. I think one represents many, just like good feedback, bad feedback, that kind of thing. Right. So when I hear from one back, I go, oh, okay, then it's probably working. That homework assignment is getting carried out.
Yeah. I always say one bit of good feedback represents 100. One bit of bad feedback just represents that person. That's the only way
that's probably right. That's
the only way I can handle it.
Sounds correct.
So as we think about, last question from me, as we think about long-term and keeping this strength-based approach going, because I think that's what a lot of people find that the most difficult. They'll do kind of a one and done and they lose some momentum. As you think about organizational wide and what you hope for, and maybe this will be more of a hope question than an implementation question. What do you think you want to do in the next year to just kind of keep that momentum going? What's on the forefront of your mind as far as being able to keep pushing the initiative forward?
Yeah. Well, we started in November with the Clifton Strengths Discovery and putting about 25 of our HR, TA, and TD leaders through that. And then we just completed a handful of them and a few others completed the Clifton Strengths the beginning of the certification program. So it was a 4-day virtual training for them to begin to deepen their knowledge around coaching around strengths. Many of them would like to continue the path forward to get fully certified. So they have a window of time over the course of the next 6 months, I believe, to pass a test. And it's different now than it was 15 years ago. I think I don't know if it's easier now but it's different. There's a test and some coaching that needs to be done. So that they've come out of now 4 days of training, and that being heavy, some of it, because it's a lot to learn, but they're still fully engaged, and they want to pursue full certification. That's a great indication to us that we're going to have the ambassadors in the organization, the capability in the organization to continue the implementation of strengths going forward, because we need that. It can't just be 3 coaches in the center. We really need our divisions engaged. So
that's great, exciting to hear. Mary Rose, anything that I might have missed that you want to pass along to the strength community at large, based on your rollout or your implementation? I don't pretend to know everything. So anything that I might have missed that you'd want to share?
You covered so much. I think I would just say there's a lot of change work involved in build. And I know many of you are independent coaches, many of the HR leaders and TD leaders on this call or listening in probably recognize that it parallels a lot of the change work that we do to continue to build and strengthen our organizations from the inside out. So, follow the path, patience and persistence. You'll find lots of successes, and just build on those successes one at a time. So that would be my last thought on it.
Appreciate that. We do have some questions from the chat room that I'd like to get to. Sure. So Marina asks, how far ahead do you usually plan the development programs and plans for your organization?
Great question. So we probably, I will say our programs are at this point built and almost on rinse and repeat mode. So they are long-standing programs that don't need any further refinement or overhaul. Once they're in that state, we plan things about a calendar year in advance. So for example, for this, our fiscal year, by the way, is different than the true calendar year. So our fiscal year just started this month, May 1st. So for this fiscal calendar year, if you will, the planning was started in November. The calendar was really set in terms of what we would do. Fiscal year 22-23 is how we call our fiscal years. So about a year in advance.
Do you enjoy the planning process? Is that something you like doing as part of what you do?
Yeah, we do. I love doing that. It's a little bit puzzle making and happening. And there's a lot of things like logistics and very pragmatic tactical things of, classroom space now that we're coming off of COVID and everyone's returning back to work and really clamoring for in-person sessions again. That reintroduces all the, brings us back to all the logistical constraints and considerations we had to do in which city, and do we have an office there, and how big does that office, all of that has to happen. So just both strategy and tactics come into play with planning.
Too bad we can't post our corporate planning like the Wordle that we post
exactly.
on right out there, just to show how much work we've put into this, right? So Ken asked the question, do you use the all 34 report or just top 5? And then are you taking advantage of the new manager report at all? And the new meaning new from last year.
Yep. Do I use all 34 or just the top 5? I use the full 34. The full 34 is super powerful as a coach. Can I coach on just the top 5? I absolutely can, but I can probably go an inch deep with just the top 5 versus when I have the full 34 and I can see an individual's dominant talents, those being their top 10, their top 11, as well as their bottom 5 that might indicate blind spots or watch outs, I feel I can go a mile deep. So for me, I love the 34 report. And then I think there was a second part to that question. How do you use the new managers report? The new managers report is super powerful. If it's the same one that I'm thinking about, Jim, that's the one that it's the 34. I think it's 25 to 32 pages. Like it's that.
It's a top 10, but it's 20. I think it's 20 some pages. Yeah.
20 some pages. Yeah. That is extremely, if it's the same one that I'm thinking about that has the the Gallup domains,
Mhm.
and there's a particular page. I believe it's page 22.
That's the all 34, and it's the all 34, and it's page 21.
21. Okay, there you go.
There we go.
I knew it's in there.
It's good.
Yeah,
No,
24. Yeah.
Yeah.
That page is incredible.
Mhm.
And as a coach, I flip to that page first with my coaching. So
From
incredibly powerful.
From an organizational standpoint, when an org wants to go this way, do they get top 5? Do they get all 34? Do they get an opportunity for either? How are you guys working?
Oh, yeah, that's actually a great question. So even before my arrival at Lockton, we had leaders, associates, managers finding their way to Gallup Strengths one way or another. They might have picked up one of the books, and in the books has the code that gives them their top 5. So across our organization, we found that there are little pockets of associates out there that already have their top 5. What we are doing as an org, though, is we want to release to them their full 34. And we can do that through our account team at Gallup. We just say, hey, Nicole Smith has her top 5. Can we release her 34 to her so she has her report? So for us, our go-to is to use the full 34.
Yeah, I like that idea, and I've watched a lot of organizations do this where it's top 5 out the door, but as they show interest, as they get involved in it, as they see some things, and if they ask, right? If they just ask, it's a great opportunity to kind of as a reward, as a recognition tool for that. Never held back, but a great opportunity for them to engage at another level. Ken, I'm going to change this question a little bit, so it won't be exactly as it is on the screen, but what results are you seeing? And I kind of want to think, we make some big promises around team performance with CliftonStrengths, those teams that are performing. We addressed this a little bit earlier in the program when we talked about that. But are you seeing any performance oriented, development oriented in some other way, kind of around this?
It's too early probably for us to say, but the question is there. It's already being provoked and asked. So for example, the sales side of Lockton is, we call it the producer group. That's what, just sort of like our sales organization. And there's some curiosity right now about the profile of the best, the profile of the most successful. And then 2, same thing, teams, the profile and the makeup of the leaders who are the best, or those who are engaged with Gallup. Are they indeed delivering more, delivering different? Probably too early, just 5 months now, 14 months for me in my role, but 5 months with Gallup. But I hope over the course of the next 1 or 2 years, we will have that kind of insight.
Yeah, and you probably won't see any single set of strengths in those, because we know those strengths can work in any kind of role.
Right.
But great to start asking some of the questions about some of those talents, right? That's making them successful. Good timing. We have a brand new CliftonStrengths for sales report that's coming out June 1st that we're excited about. And so hopefully you guys, it's brand new. I mean, we're just starting to talk about it. So your sales teams, this may be, as you think about the future of what you're doing and your sales teams, that could be.
Absolutely. Yeah. Count us in for something like that. We'd love to explore that.
Super cool.
Yeah.
As you think about, I'll kind of wrap it with this question, the magic wand. If you had a magic wand and you could change anything organizationally, structurally, around the speed of things, what would be a wish that you could kind of say, man, or a hope, I'm really hoping in the next 6 months we would see this. What would that be?
So I love converting the holdouts. So like in it's a change effort, and we experience it in any organization with any change that we're bringing forward. CliftonStrengths no different than any of the others. And there are resistors in our organization. We've talked a lot about ambassadors. We've talked a lot about champions, the early adopters, but there are some that are holding out. So I hope that this time next year, we've begun to convert some of those into believers and into champions in the organization, because those leaders can bring a great tool, a great self-discovery, a great message to the teams below them by doing so, by becoming champions around Gallup strengths.
In Spanish, we call woo charisma. That's the term we use. And I think you have enough charisma. You'll convince and influence, even though you don't have woo in your top 5. I'm sure somewhere in there that you will have the influence to push those forward. Listen, nothing overcomes resistance like success. So as teams start to have success and that people start saying, hey, wait a minute. Like, I know I was against that, but I'm actually seeing this thing work.
Yeah.
Maybe we ought to give this a try.
That's it.
So congratulations. Well, thank you.
Great.
Mary Rose, thank you for taking the time today to be a part of this conversation.
Of course.
I appreciate it.
Happy to do it.
Thanks for all the work that you've done over the last gazillion years that you've been involved with. But you're right. You
now that makes me sound even older.
Maybe just 3 years.
3 years.
Big mistake on my part. But thanks for all the work that you do, and thanks for coming on today. I appreciate it. Can you hang tight for me 1 second? I'll close this
Absolutely.
up.
Yeah.
Okay, hang tight. We'll remind everyone to take full advantage. All the resources we talked about are available. Many of them available in Gallup Access. Head out to gallup.com/CliftonStrengths for coaching, master coaching, or if you want to become a Gallup certified strengths coach, or you're an organization that wants to engage with us like Lockton has, you can send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Super easy. We'll just give us some information. We'll get right back to you on that as well. You can find us on Facebook and our big Facebook group if that's what you want to do, facebook.com/group/call-to-coach, or any other social platform just by searching Clifton Strengths. We want to thank you for joining us. For those who joined us live, thanks for doing that today. For everyone else listening to the podcast, there's probably another one. Just hit play and go on to the next one. There's some great encouragement for you. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.